"Sir, remove her from this seat. She doesn't belong here." The words cut through the first-class cabin like static tearing across a radio. Passengers froze mid-sip, newspapers lowered, phones tilted upward. A flight attendant in a pressed gray uniform leaned forward, fingers stabbing the air at row 2 amperes. Her tone was not a request. It was a verdict. The woman in the seat did not move. Smooth, powder blue suit, posture straight, eyes calm. She didn't fidget, didn't explain. She simply looked at the attendant with the stillness of stone, as if every insult in the world had already brushed across her skin before this one arrived. Behind her, a man in a navy tie crossed his arms, jaw set. He was the cabin manager, drawn in like a prosecutor to a trial that hadn't started but already had a verdict. To the left, a businessman in a dark suit leaned forward, eyebrows raised, as if the spectacle was theater staged for his flight. Phones shifted in hands. A few passengers whispered, "What's happening?" The attendant's voice grew sharper. "This is first class. Your pass is invalid. Either move to economy or leave this aircraft." A red arrow might as well have pointed at her in that moment, not on a screen, but in every eye staring. Accusation became her seatmate. Suspicion became her shadow. The woman did not blink. She remembered this tone. At 19, it was a clerk at a train station. At 27, a hotel manager. Each time, the same dismissal hidden behind words like policy or procedure. Each time, she walked away. But not today. Her silence unsettled the room. The man, 2 rows back, coughed into his hand, stealing glances. Another reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the record button. A young woman near the window whispered, "This doesn't look right." But her voice was swallowed by the hum of the engine and the weight of authority standing in the aisle. The attendant leaned closer, finger almost brushing the woman's shoulder. "You're holding up real passengers. Do you understand me?" The cabin was no longer quiet. It was charged. Eyes darted, breaths held, judgment thick in the recycled air. And yet she, Saturday, anchored. Her stillness was louder than any argument. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The woman in 2 amperes lifted her gaze, calm, focused, silent. She did not need to raise her voice. The storm was already gathering for her. She had boarded quietly. No entourage, no designer luggage dragging across the jet bridge to announce wealth. Just a slim leather case tucked beneath her arm and a ticket paid in full under her own name. Row 2 amperes, window seat, first class. Her name, Danielle Brooks, age 36. A woman most passengers read as ordinary. What they could not read was her badge, sealed away in the lining of that same leather case, the gold-etched identification of a federal auditor assigned to aviation oversight. Today, she was flying undercover. Danielle had chosen her look deliberately. Pale blue suit, hair pulled smooth, no jewelry, no status symbols. She wanted to test what she had seen too many times in complaints. Passengers denied dignity because of how they looked, not what their ticket said. Her assignment wasn't just paperwork in Washington. It was here, in the cabin, in real time. The cabin, when she entered, was calm, almost serene. Businessmen scrolling through emails, a couple sipping champagne, a young trainee flight attendant checking her tablet nervously in the galley. No one noticed Danielle take her seat. That was the point. But calm never lasts long where prejudice waits. The first stir came when the attendant glanced at her boarding pass and then at her face, a hesitation. Not long, just a second. But Danielle had lived long enough to know a second can stretch into a verdict. She had seen it at hotel lobbies, at car rentals, at banks. One beat too long, one stare too sharp. The moment when service became suspicion. Now it was happening again, 30,000 feet in the air. She kept her silence, not because she lacked words, but because silence gave them room to reveal themselves. Her stillness was her trap. Behind her, whispers built. A man in a gray suit muttered, "Looks out of place." Another shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Danielle and the crew gathering at her row. A young woman, 2 seats down, clutched her bag tighter, sensing tension she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. Danielle's breath stayed steady. In her mind, she saw Atlanta 10 years ago. An airport lounge where an agent told her, "You don't fit our profile." Back then, she swallowed the insult, boarded quietly, and vowed never to forget. That vow had carried her here into this uniform silence, into this very seat. No one around her knew. Not the passengers watching, not the attendants posturing, not the manager looming with arms folded. None of them knew they weren't shaming a powerless woman. They were testing a federal officer with authority to shut down an entire airline in a single report. Danielle let the weight of that secret steady her. She adjusted her posture, not to challenge, not to argue, just to exist exactly where she belonged. Her eyes lifted once, scanning the cabin. Every detail was logged, every insult would be remembered. The flight hadn't left the ground, but the investigation had already begun. The air shifted the moment the second attendant arrived. Taller, male, carrying the authority of someone who believed his uniform was armor. He leaned down toward Danielle's seat, voice low but sharp enough for row 3 to hear. "Ma'am, this seat has been reassigned. You'll need to move to economy." Danielle didn't flinch. Her boarding pass lay on the armrest, crisp, intact. The barcode still visible, paid in full, scanned green at the gate. She simply rested her hand over it, steady, as if anchoring the truth to the seat itself. "Your pass is invalid," he continued, straightening like a judge about to deliver sentence. "If you refuse to move, we'll have security escort you off the plane." A murmur stirred behind them. One passenger whispered, "Why her?" Another leaned across the aisle to get a better view. Danielle's eyes narrowed slightly. There it is again, she thought. Not the words, but the pattern. Economy for you. Luxury for them. Policy. Weaponized as prejudice. The female attendant from before crossed her arms, lips curled. "This happens all the time," she said loudly, making sure nearby passengers caught every syllable. "People try to sneak into first class with fake tickets. It's pathetic." Her words stung not because Danielle believed them, but because she knew others might. Bias always cloaked itself in the language of procedure. From the galley, the young trainee, barely in her 20s, watched with unease. Tablet in hand, she hesitated, as though she had seen the pass scan green at the gate but feared to speak now. Her silence trembled in the recycled air. Danielle stayed seated. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "This is my assigned seat." The attendant smirked. "Not anymore." A businessman across the aisle chuckled, shaking his head. "Should have known. Doesn't look first class." His companion laughed quietly, covering his mouth but not his prejudice. Danielle inhaled slowly, centering herself. She had heard this before. "Doesn't look the part." The words came back like ghosts from boardrooms, from hotels, from offices where doors closed just a little too quickly. Now, on this flight, the ghosts spoke through uniforms and name tags. The cabin manager stepped closer, arms folded, jaw tight. "Last chance, ma'am. Move willingly, or we'll move you." Every eye was on her. Every breath was a verdict. Phones hovered, some recording low behind seatbacks, others held openly, their red lights glowing like quiet alarms. Danielle remained still, anchored. Her silence wasn't compliance, it was preparation. Because while they mistook her for powerless, she was measuring every word, every action, every bias clothed as policy. And the moment to reveal the truth was drawing nearer. Danielle did not rise. She did not argue. She simply adjusted her sleeve, smoothed the fabric of her suit, and folded her hands neatly in her lap. Her stillness was deliberate, louder than any protest. The female attendant shifted her weight, irritated. "Did you hear me?" she demanded, voice sharp enough to pierce the quiet hum of the engines. "You don't belong here. This seat isn't yours." But Danielle's silence hung heavier than words. Passengers leaned in, unsettled by the calm. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "Why isn't she fighting back?" Another muttered, "Maybe she's guilty." Silence always confused people. They expected anger, shouting, spectacle. They didn't know what to do when a woman simply sat anchored, unshaken, letting their own voices expose them. The male attendant cleared his throat, louder now, as though volume could substitute for truth. "Ma'am, if you refuse to move, you'll be considered non-compliant. Do you understand what that means?" Danielle lifted her eyes, met his gaze. She did not blink. She did not speak. It rattled him more than argument ever could. From the galley, the trainee's tablet trembled slightly in her hands. She had seen the green scan. She knew the pass was valid. Yet fear of rank, fear of retaliation pressed her lips shut. Her silence mirrored Danielle's, but for different reasons. Survival, not strategy. The cabin began to buzz. Low voices, rising tension, suspicion swirling like turbulence no one had predicted. One passenger coughed to break the pressure. Another raised a phone higher, the small red recording light winking like an accusation. Danielle's mind flickered back Charlotte, age 16. Sitting in a hotel lobby, Sunday dress neat, Bible in her lap, waiting for her parents. A clerk had walked up, voice polite but blade sharp. "This area is for guests only." She remembered the sting of being escorted outside, the hot sun, the shame of being seen as trespass. That day burned into her bones. That day forged the steel she now carried in silence. She exhaled slowly, returning to the present. Not 16 anymore, not powerless. The attendants mistook her calm for weakness. They mistook stillness for surrender. But passengers began to notice something else. The young woman by the window shifted, speaking louder this time. "She hasn't even raised her voice. Why are you treating her like a threat?" Her words landed like a spark. Murmurs swelled. The narrative was cracking. Still, Danielle did not move. She knew what the attendants did not. Silence was not absence. It was preparation. Every second she refused to give them the outburst they wanted, she was tightening the lens on their own behavior. The cabin had become a courtroom. The passengers were the jury. And Danielle's silence, her composure, was the most damning evidence of all. The cabin was no longer an audience. It was a witness stand. Row by row, passengers leaned in. A man in a dark hoodie slid his phone up just above the headrest, the camera lens peeking like a quiet sentinel. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman tapped her screen twice, the red circle pulsed. Recording. "Are you seeing this?" she whispered to her seatmate. He nodded grimly. "Oh, I'm seeing it, and so will everyone else." The attendants noticed. The male attendant's jaw tightened. He hissed through his teeth. "Put the phones away. This isn't for the internet." But the murmurs only grew. One voice from the back, a young man with a baseball cap. "Why can't she sit where she paid to sit?" The question rolled forward like a ripple. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, the balance of silence shifting. Danielle still hadn't spoken. Her calm presence drew more attention than if she had shouted. She sat anchored, eyes forward, letting the cabin record what uniforms tried to erase. The female attendant's tone grew sharper, dripping contempt. "Don't be fooled," she said loudly, projecting for the jury around her. "People like her do this all the time. Fake cards, fake names. It's a scam." Phones lifted higher. A teenager near the galley whispered into her mic. "She just said people like her. I got that." Ugh. The words hung heavy in the recycled air. People like her. Bias stripped bare in 4 syllables. The young trainee, still clutching her tablet, bit her lip. She had watched the boarding pass scan green. She had seen the system confirm the seat, yet fear pressed down, heavier than duty. She shifted, inching forward, then stopped her eyes, flicking from Danielle to her superior, torn between truth and silence. Meanwhile, murmurs turned into voices. "This is wrong," someone said aloud. "She hasn't done anything." Another, "Her ticket scanned, I saw it." The cabin became a chorus, uneven but growing. Doubt seeped into the atmosphere. No longer a quiet humiliation, it was a public interrogation, and the jury had cameras. Danielle's memory flickered again. Miami, age 25. At a bank counter, the teller refusing her check, muttering, "High risk." She had left humiliated but determined. That memory hardened into resolve now. Today, she wouldn't leave. She lifted her gaze at last, not at the attendants, but at the passengers holding phones. Calm, steady, measured. The look of someone who knew evidence mattered more than outrage. A woman in row 4 met her eyes, whispering into her phone, "She's not moving. She's not breaking. This is power." The hum of the engines deepened, the tension thicker. The attendants had tried to make her invisible. Instead, they had made her unforgettable. And with every phone raised, the truth was no longer hers alone. It was spreading pixel by pixel, frame by frame beyond the cabin walls. The cabin manager finally stepped forward, no longer content to linger behind his crew. His shoulders squared, arms folded tight, voice pitched, to command the entire first-class section. "Enough. This passenger is not authorized to be here. She is refusing staff instructions and is therefore in violation of FAA compliance." He didn't look at Danielle when he said it. He looked at the audience, the rows of passengers now silent except for the faint buzz of recording phone. He wasn't speaking to her. He was building a case against her in real time. Danielle turned her head slowly, eyes locking onto his, still calm, still silent. The female attendant smirked at his backing. "Told you," she added, her voice sugar-laced with contempt. "Frauds always crack under pressure. She'll be gone in 5 minutes." Oh. But Danielle didn't crack. Across the aisle, a man whispered to his wife. "Fraud?" She hasn't even raised her voice. The wife shook her head, muttering, "It's ugly, really ugly." The manager leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his disdain. "This seat is reserved for priority passengers. You don't look like one." That sentence hit the cabin like turbulence. Several passengers shifted in their seats. A teenager gasped under her breath. "He actually said it!" Her phone caught every syllable. Danielle exhaled once, slow and steady. Inside her mind, another memory resurfaced. 22 years old, applying for a corporate job. The interviewer scanned her resume, then her face, and said, "We're looking for a different image." The rejection had fueled her career, every audit, every late night at her desk. Now that same poison surfaced here. "You don't look like one." The male attendant pressed the threat harder. "Ma'am, if you don't move now, security will remove you physically. You're wasting everyone's time." Danielle's hands remained folded. Her eyes stayed forward. Her silence was louder than their entire script. From row 4, a woman's voice broke through. "This isn't right. She's sitting quietly. Why are you harassing her?" Her phone trembled in her hands but stayed aimed at the scene. The manager snapped his head toward her. "Stay out of this. This is protocol." But his voice wavered. Protocol didn't sound so clean when it was being filmed from 6 angles. The female attendant doubled down. "People like her always push boundaries. It's dangerous. We're protecting the cabin." Passengers murmured louder now. "Dangerous? She hasn't done anything." Another voice. "Protecting from what? Her sitting still?" The tension coiled tighter. The crew's authority, once absolute, was unraveling thread by thread. And yet Danielle hadn't spoken more than a sentence since boarding. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was the storm's eye. The manager's patience snapped like a seatbelt under strain. He reached down, plucked Danielle's boarding pass from the armrest, and with one violent motion tore it in half. The sound paper ripping echoed louder than the engines for a split second. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A woman clutched her pearls. Someone muttered, "Did he just?" Another voice, sharper. "He destroyed her ticket." Ugh. The female attendant smiled with satisfaction, as if the shredding of paper had erased a person's right to exist. She tossed the fragments into a trash bag and snapped her gloves tight. "Problem solved. Economy is at the back, sweetheart." Phones rose higher, angles multiplied. Every passenger knew this wasn't procedure. It was humiliation, deliberate and cold. Danielle sat motionless, hands still folded in her lap. Her eyes never left the manager's face. The silence between them was heavier than turbulence. The male attendant pulled a radio from his belt. "Security, Gate B 14. Immediate removal. Passenger is non-compliant, attempting fraud." His voice carried across the cabin, announcing her guilt as if it were already verdict. Murmurs swelled. A man in row 3 said loudly, "She hasn't done a thing." Another echoed, "That's her seat. She was here first." The female attendant shot them a glare. "Stay seated, this doesn't concern you." But it did. The passengers were no longer passive. A teenager leaned into his camera, whispering, "They tore her ticket. They're calling security. This is insane." Danielle's mind flickered again. Los Angeles, age 29. A hotel clerk demanding 3 forms of ID while letting 3 white men check in without a question. The humiliation then had left her silent tears in a parking lot. Tonight, her silence was steel. The manager crouched lower, face close enough that only she could hear. "You'll regret this. We make the rules up here." Finally, Danielle moved. Not to rise, not to argue, but to reach for her phone. Calm, deliberate. She dialed a single number. When the line clicked open, her voice was low, precise. "Activate protocol. Log this moment. They just destroyed federal property." The words weren't shouted, but they sliced through the cabin like lightning. The passengers closest leaned in, whispering, "Federal property? What does that mean?" The male attendant frowned, uncertain now. The female attendant scoffed, "Oh, please, another bluff. Call security. Get her out." The cabin was no longer calm. It was a courtroom with no judge, only witnesses, and every witness had a camera. And Danielle Brooks, still seated, still silent but for one phone call, had just shifted the balance. The cabin held its breath. Danielle's phone pressed to her ear, her voice steady, deliberate. Confirmed timestamp. Incident logged. Begin escalation protocol. On the other end, unseen by anyone in row 2 amperes, a voice answered crisply, "Confirmed. Recording started. Systems ready." The words weren't loud, but the passengers closest heard enough protocol, recording, systems. Their eyes widened. A businessman whispered, "She's not bluffing. This is official." The manager scoffed, straightening as though to tower over her. "What protocol? You think a phone call will save you?" Danielle finally lifted her gaze to him, calm as ever. "Every second of this is evidence. Every word you've said, every action you've taken, logged and secured." Phones tilted higher. The teenager filming muttered into her mic, "She just said it's evidence. She's logging them." The female attendant sneered, leaning closer. "Evidence of what? Sitting where you don't belong?" Daniela didn't even blink. Evidence of civil rights violations. Evidence of destruction of property. Evidence of bias applied as policy. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, but their cameras stayed up. The courtroom had found its prosecution. The manager's jaw tightened. "Big words, but you're still leaving this plane." Her phone lit again. The voice returned, louder now, speaker carrying across the row. "Agent Brooks, escalation confirmed. Do you want legal flagged?" The word agent cracked the air open like thunder. Passengers turned to one another. "Agent? Did she say agent?" Someone whispered. Danielle lowered the phone slightly, her tone measured but firm. "Stand by. Not yet." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Their script fraud, protocol, removal, suddenly felt thin, fragile against the weight of her calm authority. From the back, a woman shouted, "If she's an agent, you're finished. I'm recording everything." The female attendant snapped back, panic edging her voice. "She's lying. Don't believe her." But disbelief rang hollow when the evidence was stacking against them in cameras, in witnesses, in the stillness of the woman they'd tried to erase. Danielle returned the phone to her ear, eyes sweeping the cabin. "Log passenger witness statements. Confirm video capture." "Confirmed," the voice replied. "Multiple angles secured." The murmur swelled into a tide. What began as whispers was now outrage rising through the aisles. And yet Danielle didn't raise her voice once. Her composure was the sharpest weapon in the room. The attendants had tried to make her invisible. Instead, she was turning the cabin into an open file, every insult, every action, every shred of prejudice cataloged in real time. And they had no idea just how far that file could reach. The cabin manager leaned in, voice sharp, desperate to claw back control. "You're wasting everyone's time. Security will handle this in minutes. Stop pretending you have power here." Danielle finally shifted. For the first time since boarding, she rose slightly in her seat, spine straight, voice carrying not loud, but resonant enough to cut through every murmur in the cabin. "You just denied service to a federal auditor. On duty, in first class. Every word you've spoken, every action you've taken, is now evidence in an active investigation." The air cracked. Silence followed, then a chorus of gasps. "Wait," she said, "Federal Auditor. She's government?" "Oh my God, did you hear that?" Phones tilted closer. Every passenger wanted the proof on record. The teenager in row 5 whispered, almost reverent, "She dropped it. She's not bluffing." The female attendant's smirk faltered, color draining from her cheeks. "You're lying," she stammered, but the confidence had bled from her voice. Danielle reached into her slim leather case, not hurried, not theatrical, simply controlled. She drew out a black wallet, flicked it open. Gold letters glinted under the cabin lights. Federal Aviation Oversight Division Special Auditor. The manager's mouth fell open, but no words came. Passengers leaned forward, eyes wide, recording every frame. One man muttered into his phone, "She's showing the badge. This is real. This is happening live." Danielle let the badge rest in her hand, steady as steel. Her voice was calm, precise, cutting through the stunned air. "You destroyed a boarding pass issued by the federal government. You attempted to remove a passenger from a seat she lawfully purchased. And you did it on record, in front of witnesses, under cameras. Gasps turned to murmurs, murmurs to outrage. Unbelievable. They tore her pass and she's the auditor? This airline is finished. Ugh. The male attendant swallowed hard, stepping back, eyes darting to the cameras now fixed on him. The female attendant fumbled with her gloves, face pale. The manager stood frozen, authority evaporating with every second. Danielle closed the badge, slid it calmly back into her case. Then she spoke not just to the crew, but to the entire cabin. Understand this. I don't need to raise my voice. I don't need to make a scene. I am the scene. And tonight, this flight became my audit. The cabin erupted. Some passengers clapped. Others cheered softly. A wave of support rolling toward row 2 amperes. Phones captured it all. The shift from humiliation to revelation. The attendants had sought to erase her. Instead, they had exposed themselves. And for the first time, they realized who truly held power in the air. For a heartbeat, the cabin was silent. Then the weight of the revelation hit, and everything unraveled at once. The manager's face drained of color, his lips moving but no words forming. He looked at the torn boarding pass in his hand as if the scraps themselves had betrayed him. His authority, once booming across the aisles, now hung limp in the recycled air. The female attendant staggered back a step, clutching the service cart for balance. Her smirk was gone, her posture collapsing into jittery panic. She whispered under her breath, "No, this can't be real," as though denial could undo the badge every passenger had just seen. The male attendant tried to salvage the script. She forged it. Anyone can fake a badge. But the quiver in his voice betrayed him. And before he could finish, a passenger shouted from the back, "Forged? While you're live on 100 phones?" Laughter and outrage fused into a wave that crushed his protest flat. One by one, passengers rose. Some clapped, some pointed phones straight at the crew. A woman near the galley called out, "We saw her name on the seat list. She belongs here. You're the ones out of line." The teenager with the live stream turned her camera back to her own face, breathless. "You guys, the flight crew just tried to kick out a federal auditor. They tore her pass. This is blowing up right now." Her chat was flooding in real time, thousands of comments, disbelief, and fury spilling across screens far beyond the cabin walls. The young trainee, the one with the tablet, finally found her courage. She stepped out from the galley, voice trembling but clear. Her boarding pass scanned green. I saw it. She was authorized. This was wrong. Gasps met her words. Someone clapped loudly, and soon others followed, until the sound spread through the cabin like a drumbeat of solidarity. Danielle didn't move. She didn't need to. The passengers had become her chorus, her jury, her proof. She had handed them truth, and they had turned it into justice. The manager raised a hand as if to restore order, but the gesture looked hollow. His own staff no longer believed in him. The female attendant's eyes darted to the floor, unable to meet the stares burning into her. The male attendant fumbled with his radio, but every word he might have spoken would have been recorded, dissected, condemned. The collapse wasn't loud. It was visible in posture, in silence, in the way uniforms that once commanded obedience now looked like costumes stripped of meaning. Passengers shook their heads, muttering, "Shameful. Unprofessional." Imagine thinking you could get away with this. And over it all, Danielle sat anchored, silent, unshaken. The storm was no longer hers to carry. It was theirs to face. Danielle lifted her phone again, calm as if she were making an ordinary call, but her words carried the weight of a gavel striking wood. "Control, log incident resolution. Effective immediately. Suspend credentials for flight crew, cabin manager, lead attendant, and male attendant on flight 472. Terminate access. Pending federal review." Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The power was in the precision, each syllable like iron on stone. Passengers leaned forward, breath caught. The teenager's live stream shook in her hands. She's firing them, right now, mid-flight." On the line, the reply was instant, professional, absolute, confirmed, credentials suspended, access revoked, notifications delivered. The cabin manager's phone buzzed on his hip. He pulled it out, stared at the glowing red alert across the screen. Access denied. Federal review pending. His mouth opened, then closed again. The authority drained out of him in a single vibration. The female attendant fumbled with her device, tapping furiously. Same message, same red lockout. Her hands trembled as though the screen itself burned her. The male attendant tried his radio. Static. Then silence. Locked out. Gasps spread through the cabin, then applause, then cheers rising like thunder. One passenger shouted, "That's justice!" Another, "You don't humiliate someone and keep your job after this." The young trainee stepped forward, voice clear now, conviction surging. They abused their power. She corrected it. That's what accountability looks like. The crew, once towering figures of authority, now looked small, stripped of uniforms that meant nothing without trust. They avoided the cameras, but the cameras followed anyway. Their downfall was already public. Live. Irreversible. Danielle lowered her phone, placing it gently back in her case. Her posture never shifted from calm, her hands never shook. She had dismantled their authority without ever leaving her seat. The passengers erupted again, some standing, clapping above their heads. One woman whispered into her recording, voice thick with awe. She didn't raise her voice once, and she dismantled them. For the crew, it was the end. For the passengers, it was revelation. For Danielle, it was simply protocol. The strike was not loud. It was surgical, final, absolute. And in that moment, the cabin understood. Justice had boarded this flight quietly, taken her seat in row 2 amperes, and revealed herself only when the abuse demanded it. The roar of applause slowly faded, replaced by a charged silence, the kind that follows a verdict no one dares to contest. Every phone in the cabin was still raised, red lights glowing, immortalizing what had just unfolded in row 2 amperes. Danielle sat exactly as she had from the beginning, upright, composed, hands folded, but now the weight of the room had shifted. She was no longer the target of suspicion. She was the axis the entire cabin revolved around. The cabin manager lingered in the aisle, face pale, his badge useless plastic now. The female attendant stared at the floor, refusing to meet a single gaze. The male attendant gripped his useless radio like a lifeline, but it offered no signal, no salvation. They had all been dismantled without a shout, without a struggle. One passenger broke the quiet with a whisper. Unbelievable. Another, firmer. No, it's justice. Danielle let the words settle. Then, finally, she rose. Not hurried, not dramatic, just steady, like a verdict written into stone. She looked around the cabin, eyes sweeping over every witness, every camera, every face frozen between shock and awe. Her voice was even deliberate. What you saw tonight is not new. It's not the first time I've been told I don't belong. It won't be the last time someone tries to erase me with a uniform or a policy or a smirk. Passengers nodded, murmuring agreement. The young trainee near the galley bit her lip, tears brimming, her courage mirrored back to her in those words. Danielle continued, her tone deepening, resonant. But understand this. Silence is not surrender. Stillness is not weakness. And dignity is not negotiable. The line cut through the cabin like a blade. Phones shook as passengers tried to capture every syllable. She turned slightly, eyes landing on the crew stripped of power. You thought you were removing a passenger. What you did was reveal yourselves. On record. Forever. The female attendant flinched. The manager closed his eyes. The male attendant dropped his radio to the floor. Danielle shifted her gaze back to the passengers, her voice steady, carrying the weight of both steel and grace. I don't need to go viral to prove who I am. I don't need to shout to be heard, because I don't need a camera to deliver justice. I am the result of it. The words hung heavy, final, impossible to contest. Applause erupted, louder than before, rolling down the cabin like thunder in a canyon. Some passengers rose to their feet, clapping above their heads. Others shouted, "Yes!" and "That's power!" The teenager live streaming spoke breathlessly into her mic. You guys, she just said it. This is history. This is bigger than a flight. Danielle lowered herself back into her seat, calm as ever, as if the storm had passed and she had merely weathered it without a scratch. Outside, the jet bridge still clung to the aircraft, and the plane had yet to leave the ground. But the journey had already changed every person on board. The cabin had begun as a place of hierarchy, of silence, of unchecked authority. Now it was something else entirely. A courtroom where truth had prevailed, a classroom where dignity had been taught without a single lecture, and a theater where justice itself had delivered the final act. As passengers settled, whispers still buzzing, one woman leaned into her camera and said softly, She didn't just keep her seat. She changed the room. Danielle closed her eyes briefly, exhaled, calm again, anchored again, and ready for the flight ahead. Justice didn't always arrive in a uniform. Sometimes it boarded quietly, sat in 2 amperes, and waited. Tonight, it had spoken.